test phones? I mean, does the government take phones off the shelf and test them to make sure that they comply with the government's outdated limits? Well, I thought the answer was no, because there certainly is nothing online, and we don't really have a surveillance program. We operate with the honor system. Okay, so there's no checking. Is both for phones and towers. The companies have laboratories where they get their phones tested. They send in the test, and there is no checking to make sure, well, let's take the phone and test it to make sure that this test that we have is actually adequate. So I have investigated the federal government and various agencies. I've done over 300 Freedom of Information requests. Those are where you write to different agencies and you ask for records related to something very specific. And what I found is that the US FCC actually had tested some phones, very few, by the way. I'm going to tell you the story about this, but they then suppressed the findings. And they actually found that phones exceeded the FCC SAR limit when the phone was tested at 2 millimeters from the body, like in a pocket. I'll call it the pocket test. I found that out years later from one of my federal, my FOIA investigations. And I'm going to tell you this story about starting at the beginning. Well, it's not the beginning of the whole story, but it's the beginning of how the FCC decided to do such tests. So back several years ago, the Chicago Tribune decided to take phones, get them tested in an FCC-accredited laboratory and see the radiation. And they also tested the phones at 2 millimeters from the body. They called it the pocket test. They came out with a report saying that the phones that they had tested showed exceedances, violations of the FCC limit, especially when it came to the pocket test. Now, right after that, the FCC, let me go back to this. The FCC said they're going to investigate this. Then a few months later, there's a report that comes out from the FCC saying that they tested the phones and that they found that there were no violations of any FCC rules. That was in 2019. And by the way, that was right around the time when the FCC decided to maintain its 1996 limits in 2019, and also to maintain the way they test phones without a separation distance. So then the Chicago Tribune did a follow-up article that said, the FCC says the tests find cell phones comply with federal limits on radio frequency radiation. The FCC's recent study, and in this long report that the Chicago follow-up article they did, they kind of ended it right at the end. They said, the FCC's recent study did not test phones at 2 millimeters distance. Only what I found from my Freedom of Information request was that the FCC had tested phones at 2 millimeters and they had found exceedances. This is a screen save right here from the spreadsheet that was sent to me when I asked, send every cell phone radiation SAR test that the FCC has done at any level of separation distance. And at first, actually, they didn't want to give me any records. They told me to go to the FCC website. And I said, no, I want to know. And I had to follow up with them on it. And this says confidential. This spreadsheet says confidential, and it shows that the phones they tested when it was at 2 millimeters, several of the models exceeded differences. And they even sent me a letter which said, we observed that at 2 millimeter separation distance, the FCC radio frequency exposure limits were exceeded. And here's the letter. You can go online to the Environmental Health Trust, to their FOIA documents, where you can find all of these. And what's really important, I mean, there's so many accountability issues here. But not only was this withheld from the public, and from the Chicago Tribune that was doing the report. Because when the Chicago Tribune came out saying, look, the FCC tested, the phones passed the test, it makes it seem like that the whole issue was null and void, when actually they had this information that they hadn't shared. But there were also some really important lawsuits that were happening at the same time. And the FCC omitted this information from these two court cases. One was Apple versus Cohen, where consumers who'd bought phones alleged that the phones emitted excessive radiation and that the manufacturers had engaged in deceptive marketing by showing the phone near the body and not informing them about this. The other was Berkeley versus CTIA, where the wireless industry was suing the city of Berkeley for its cell phone right to know ordinance, which directed consumers to the fine print warnings in the manuals to keep the distance. And the wireless industry had said that that violates the free speech rights of the companies, and the Berkeley shouldn't be allowed to do that, to make retailers do that. So these two cases were happening, and the FCC filed a statement in both of these cases about the issue, and they didn't include this information that says that they have found that when the phone was closer, that it could actually exceed limits in the pocket test. They also omitted this information, as I talked about, from the major FCC proceeding that was going on, the rulemaking. They had asked in 2013 specifically if it was appropriate to consider zero spacing or actual contact with the body when testing for the cell phone. They asked, should we change the way we test phones? And they never shared that with the people or put it in the docket or in their decision to not have any change. In fact, they say that it's unnecessary. They specifically said it's unnecessary to test phones at 0 millimeters. And I'll note that many organizations, including the American Academy of Pediatrics, had submitted to the FCC calling on cell phone test systems to be updated to reflect real-world current use patterns. Oh yeah, I was talking about this, but I'll just quote the FCC back in 2019. They knew that phones exceeded limits, but yet they said, even though some parties claim that the RF exposure evaluation procedures for phones should require testing with zero spacing against the body, this is unnecessary. So the Court of Appeals decision in 2021, after we sued the FCC, I should note, included the issue of cell phone testing. This has not been addressed yet by the FCC. They haven't responded to the court, but they specifically said that the FCC needed to provide a reasoned explanation for its decision to retain its test procedures. So let me share some more things, even going back in time, because one question I have is, well, do the companies know? I mean, I have a cell phone. I don't use it that much. I use it very differently than other people. Some people may say that we shouldn't have cell phones at all, and I understand that argument because really we need to have wired technology everywhere. But nonetheless, did companies know about this? So Apple iPhone 3, if you go back in time and you look at what they said in the manuals, and you also can go online to find these manuals, you'll find that they used to be very clear about how a consumer should use the phone. Here's the Apple iPhone 3. Apple iPhone SAR measurement may exceed FCC exposure guidelines for body-worn operation if positioned less than 15 millimeters, that's 5/8 of an inch, from the body. E.g., when carrying the iPhone in your pocket. They are telling you right there that it could exceed limits. And when using your iPhone near your body for voice calls or wireless data transmission over a cellular network, keep the iPhone at least 15 millimeters, that's 5/8 of an inch, away from your body. That is what the manual said. The iPhone 6 also said, carry iPhone at least 5 millimeters away from your body to ensure exposure levels remain at or below the as-tested levels. But that disappeared. So the phone came out. The manual said to carry the phone at least 5 millimeters away, and then that was removed. There was an online website where you can go, and it's the Wayback Machine. If you don't know about the Wayback Machine, go to the Wayback Machine. You can get all the information about everything that you ever want to know. Also, what there used to be on the website, they will show the changes. You can go to every year, months in the year, and find out what a website looks like at a certain time and date. So what I found is that this statement disappeared from the information for the iPhone 6 by November 17th. I'm sorry, November 2017. Same with the iPhone 7. It had come out saying, carry iPhone at least 5 millimeters away from your body to ensure exposure limits remain at or below the as-tested levels. And that was also removed by November 2017. And here, just as a clip from the Wayback Machine, where you can see it clearly says that, and then it's gone. Now, other devices have this fine print warning. I don't know for how long. So the Xbox, wireline video gaming console actually has a 20 centimeter distance. Now, I'll never forget when, gosh, this was a long time ago when I was coming onto this issue. I wanted to share it with the world. I was meeting with everyone in my community, talking to moms. I was invited to all of these tea parties at people's homes. I go to a home of this wonderful woman. She has me there with all these other mothers. We're talking about the issue. Then she has me go around the house to measure the levels in the various rooms and figure out what is emitting radiation. I go to her son's bedroom, and I have the meter in my hand, and the meter is going crazy outside of the room. I was like, well, I don't know what's going on in that room. So we open the door, and there is the bed with about at least 3 video game consoles right up against the bed. Somehow he just had them all up against the bed. And the TV was, on the back wall where you could video game from. But those consoles were emitting wireless radiation constantly, so high, right by his bed. I mean, it was like bed, video game consoles. And, even when you're not using them, they're on emitting radiation. Same with the Amazon Echo, all of these smart speakers. Even when they're not in use, they are always radiating. The Amazon Echo says this device should be installed and operated with a minimum distance of 20 centimeters between the radiator and your body. And yet kids are hugging these, sleeping next to them, having them tell them bedtime stories at night, with parents and families unaware that they're creating these exposures for their children. And, I wish the speaker could just inform whoever's using it that, look, why don't you contact the companies and have them make a wired one, wired to Ethernet to the internet, because it does not have to be wireless. I mean, that's the thing, is we're talking about all of these devices that people love and we become dependent on, but there are a lot of simple solutions. This can be solved by industry making changes to bring safer technology to market. It is not actually rocket science to fix this situation. It just requires people telling companies and policymakers, putting pressure on governments so that we have the political will to hold these companies accountable, and they will start competing for safety. Of course, the Amazon Echo Dot, 20 centimeters different, 20 centimeters between the radiator and your body in rainbow colors reminds me of cigarettes when they're marketed to kids. And here is the speaker. They collaborated with Lucky Charms. Did you catch Lucky? Just ask Alexa. Open the story of Lucky Charms and see what happens. And there was this whole campaign where Lucky Charms and Alexa worked together to have this wonderful story about Lucky Charms for the children. So companies are marketing this fairy tale of wireless safety by addressing 4 key areas. They have a multimedia public relations campaign. They're controlling the science. They've captured the government, and they have aggressive legal action against any moves by government towards transparency and accountability. So when it comes to the multimedia public relations campaign, the campaign is not just about selling products, it's about selling a narrative. The narrative asserts that wireless technology is safe, clean, and essential. But what the campaigns obscure is that there's a growing body of science, a substantial body of science by credible experts, linking wireless exposure to adverse biological effects. And this is a carefully crafted fairy tale, a house of cards, and the public remains largely unaware of the risks of this technology. Now, the fact that wireless radiation could be harmful has been known for decades. DNA damage was found in animal research performed decades ago in the mid-90s by Dr. Henry Lai and Singh and they found DNA damage from their research. They revealed the findings and they were attacked. What you're seeing is a microwave news article. It's a leaked memo between the wireless company Motorola and its PR firm. And the memory revealed a strategy still in use today, which is to wargame the science. Dr. Lai's findings were attacked, discredited, and downplayed. They lined up scientists to publicly dispute the findings and attacked his credibility and tried to get his funding taken away. And what this Motorola memo states is, I think we have sufficiently wargamed the Lai-Singh issue. Now, it is notable that the PR firm, Burstyn Marsteller, was also one of the PR firms consulting to the tobacco industry. And at the time, they were also organizing a response to the EPA report, which had found that secondhand smoke was a human carcinogen. They actually they did a whole astroturfing campaign. They created a smokers' rights group, the National Smokers Alliance, to oppose the anti-smoking legislation that was being formulated. And there are many, many stories like this in the history of cell phone radiation and non-ionizing electromagnetic field research, where the science has been wargamed. There are also published papers on this because the industry controls the science and has undue influence into the science by funding studies where they're more likely, the results are more likely to produce industry-friendly results. And there's study by Huss et al. With a follow-up as well that found industry-funded studies are significantly less likely to report adverse effects. Higher quality independent studies tend to show stronger link between long-term mobile phone use and brain tumors, while studies with industry funding reported no significant association, Prasad 2017. Study by Dr. David Carpenter, who's done incredible work on this issue for years at the University of Albany, found that government independent studies consistently found links between power line electromagnetic field exposure and childhood leukemia, while industry-funded studies largely do not. And the group from Australia, ORSA, has done incredible work. Please go to their website as well. They did a paper looking at millimeter waves and found industry-funded studies investigating millimeter waves report lower effect outcomes, 58%, compared to government-funded studies, 83%, and institution-based studies, 93%, which did show an effect. So the government is where the industry's influence runs deep. Wireless companies heavily lobby policymakers. They shape laws and government regulations that serve the interests of industry, that fast-track 5G and cell towers. And they're able, so they can get their products to market and their networks built as fast as possible. And this is a classic case of regulatory capture. So cell phone and wireless radiation, EMF radiation, just exemplifies the issue of regulatory capture in the United States. That's where the agencies that are meant to protect public health instead protect industry profits. This image you see is from a Harvard report, Captured Agency, how the FCC is dominated by the industry it presumably regulates. And it compares the tactics of the wireless industry to big tobacco. They use the same playbook to create doubt. And this report, which by the way is from 2015, also documents the heavy industry lobbying and money that has gone to Congress and decision makers over the years. And they highlight how the FCC exemplifies the revolving door between industry and government. Now, this revolving door has only become more, we have more examples. So we're now 10 years later, and I have a few slides showing the regulatory capture that had been updated to today, because the story just goes on. So as the Harvard report lays out with the FCC as exemplifying regulatory capture, the former FCC chair, Tom Wheeler, actually came from industry, where he was the head of the Wireless Association, the wireless industry lobby group in the United States. He became the FCC chair. During his tenure, he set the stage for the 5G rollout and for the deregulation that we have right now. And now he is a CEO of a telecommunications company's investment firm. You still see him featured as an expert speaking about this issue, even more recently in a GAO report that came out on 5G recently. I was shocked to see that. This is Brendan Carr, while he was a lawyer for Wiley Ryan, which was a law firm for the wireless industry. He was involved in the wireless industry's lawsuit against the city of San Francisco for its cell phone right to know lawsuit. And now he is the FCC chair. He was appointed to the FCC in 2017. Now he is the chair. And just as a brief overview of what San Francisco did or tried to do, because the wireless industry stopped it, they had adopted in 2010, 15 years ago, they adopted a point of sale cell phone radiation labeling legislation initiative, which included these posters and fact sheets that would be posted at point of sale when you went to buy your phone on why and how to minimize exposure from RF radiation from your cell phone. And as soon as it passed, the wireless industry, the CTIA, Cellular, Telecommunications and Internet Association, immediately sued the city. They claimed, like they did with Berkeley, that the ordinance violated the free speech rights of the companies as guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution. And ultimately, Berkeley had to abandon the effort in exchange for a waiver of industry's legal fees. Then you have Meredith Atwell Baker. She worked for the CTIA. She became the FCC commissioner. She went on then to lead the CTIA wireless industry. And guess what? She is retiring this year. Before I talk about who's taking her place, I'd like to show her exemplifying greenwashing. This was a conference that the CTIA held where she's got her butterfly dress on and she is sharing how 5G is saving the climate. And I kid you not, there is actually behind her is this image of the Earth, and it has cell towers coming off of it. And it's all about, the whole conference was about how 5G is fighting climate change, even though the reports are showing that 5G, the Internet of Things, and the way we are using this technology is increasing energy consumption because of the increased power needs of these networks, which are more powerful, and also because of the sheer amount of devices, all of these devices that we're using. Okay, so Meredith is retiring as the head of the CTIA, and who will take her place? Well, former FCC chair Ajit Pai will. He started out working both in industry and government. He was an in-house counsel for Verizon. Then He went on to be at the FCC for many years. He was FCC chair, and now he is taking the place of Meredith Atwell Baker as the new CEO and president of the CTIA wireless industry. So I've been talking about the different ways that industry is maintaining this fairy tale. Heavy and aggressive lawsuits is another tactic. And I talked about San Francisco. I mentioned Berkeley. I just want to tell you a little bit more about Berkeley because this was similar to San Francisco, but a little bit different because they passed a cell phone right to know ordinance, which was designed to withstand the court challenges because they knew the CTIA would sue them. So all it did was have this statement when it was first passed. This was the statement that you would get at point of sale if you carry or use your phone in a pants or shirt pocket or tucked into a bra when the phone is on and connected to a wireless network. You may exceed the federal guidelines for exposure to RF radiation. This potential risk is greater for children. Refer to the instructions in your phone or user manual for information about how to use your phone safely. This is factual, and it actually, the wireless industry tried to get it to the Supreme Court to knock it down. They did not win that. However, when the FCC submitted a filing on this issue, again, without the 2mm test results, then the Berkeley was forced not to implement the law that it had passed unanimously. And also in relation to industry, the heavy industry aggressive tactics, if you just type in cell tower lawsuit, you will see all of these lawsuits where the wireless companies are suing localities over cell towers, not being allowed to put cell towers where they want to put them. Just tons, lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit. And you'll hear it in city council meetings, right? You'll be in a city council meeting, you're trying to have more responsible cell tower placement, so it's not right in front of your home or right in front of your kid's school. And the wireless industry will say, well, that, legally, we are, no, you can't do that. And they will threaten, they will actually talk about how that this is a legal issue and that they can sue. And the members, the decision makers, the council members will actually talk about, well, what if we get sued? And some have been quite afraid of that. Some are saying, we're going to stand up to this issue. This is not right. We should have some authority as to where this infrastructure is placed in our communities. And in all of these areas, the media, science, government, and the law, the wireless industry is manufacturing doubt. It's not just about defending products. It's about protecting the multi-billion-dollar business model at the expense of public health, transparency, scientific integrity, and the environment. So it's 4:27, and I know I can do a little bit longer, I was told, so I'm going to go ahead and do that because I want to address a couple issues. One is wireless in schools. Wireless was just being dumped into schools, sold to schools, I should say, because taxpayers were paying for this all across the country when I came into this issue back in 2012. And what we were not told is that there is exposure from the laptop antennas into the body as you are using a device. The closer it is, the more intense exposure you can have, especially relative to where the antenna is on the device. And yet what we're told is, things are going to be merry and bright and there's more enjoyment. We are not being informed about this issue. Schools, administrators are not told, teachers, families, kids. And this is a study by Soares et al., published in IEEE, that found that when you look at multiple devices in a classroom, there is increased exposure from all the devices. Because remember that FCC limits and the way our limits are for devices that are handheld devices or laptops and so forth, they really only look at one device at a time. And when you look at many devices all in use in a room, so in a classroom, you might have 30 kids, each who has a cell phone, right? They all have a transmitting cell phone somewhere, and this study didn't look at that. Then they all are looking at a laptop. They might all be watching a video streaming on the laptop. Plus, there's a Wi-Fi router, might even be a cell tower outside. What this study did is look at all of the devices in the room, and they found increases in places that we haven't even thought about or properly researched, such as the spinal cord, the back. They found that when comparing one student alone to a full classroom and looking at a child, an exposure to a child, that you will start to get these exposures to the back, increases in exposure at least twice in the hands, up to 40-fold in the back from all of the devices in the room. And you can get this paper online as well. Now, there are many ways that radiofrequency radiation exposure can be decreased in the classroom in schools, and many publications that have been done on this issue. There's the Collaborative for High Performance Schools Low-EMF Wiring and Best Practice document. There are two publications, which I was co-author on, Clegg et al., published in Building Science, What Makes a Smart and Healthy Building, and it was published in Building and Environment, and it details really the how and the why to reduce radio frequency wireless in buildings. Davis et al. On wireless technologies and children, published in Current Problems in Pediatric and Adolescent Healthcare. And that details the science looking at impacts to the endocrine system, to the brain, cancer, and then also has details on how medical institutions can reduce exposure, how schools can reduce exposure, how you can reduce exposure, what doctors can do. The New Jersey Education Association has an article on minimizing health risks from electronic devices, tech-safe schools. There's the Santa Clara Medical Association Best Practices in Schools, which I'm going to talk about, and also the Maryland State Advisory Council Guidelines on EMF, really important document that you can use as a resource on this issue. So let's talk about the Santa Clara Medical Association recommendations for best practices for technology in schools. They have details on the science, the why, and then they have some recommendations. Create a Safe Tech in Schools program to educate students and staff on how to reduce wireless exposures, keeping the devices on desks, not laps, using a speakerphone, keep the phones away from the body, put devices on airplane mode when not in use, and so forth. And don't use virtual reality headsets, because those will get the phone right in front of your face. Have a cell phone free policy. All across the country, right? And gosh, across the world, phones are being prohibited in classrooms. They need to be bell to bell, so the whole school day, and they need to be fully powered off. That actually not only addresses the social media, the addiction, the impacts to school culture, but also reduces the levels of wireless radiation in the classroom. So it's really an important, perhaps, side effect, because a lot of these groups who are doing the cell phone bans, for all the right reasons, by the way, don't know about this issue. It's a really important issue to bring into the conversation. Then there are recommendations regarding technology and infrastructure. So use hardwired Ethernet devices instead of Wi-Fi. I right now have my laptop plugged in with Ethernet, not Wi-Fi. Works fast, safe, secure, fantabulous. I love it. And I have the Wi-Fi off on my device as well. Get professional measurements, but independent professional measurements, not from the industry or company. Oh my gosh, how many schools do I know about where parents got concerned? They brought in the company measurer and found that levels are so low. And they took measurements that just would never hold up in court. And, you need to have professional measurements done. You also can really see if, when you make changes to the way the network is, you'll be able to see decreases. You have to verify if you make a change, if it's really working, both for your home or for school. Avoid the installation of smart meters and enact a policy to restrict cell towers on or near school property. And of course, with curriculum that can be used, the Massachusetts Breast Cancer Coalition has a series of curriculum that your school can download, that you can download. It's called Let's Talk Prevention, Actions You Can Take. And they don't just have it on cell phones, they also have it on water and plastics, really just awesome resource. So they have a whole curriculum on cell phones and wireless. And I was honored and thrilled to have led that effort at the Environmental Health Trust alongside Massachusetts Breast Cancer Coalition, who invited us to do that work. And it has sort of a summary of the science and what kids can do, and also some really interesting ways you can integrate it into the classroom, like in debate class. You could talk about, look, if you have, some studies showing effects and some not showing effects, what do you do? What do governments do? And there can be a debate. There are a lot of ways to get young people and our youth interested in this issue. They need to know about cell phones and wireless. They have a right to know about it. Right now, they're completely in the dark. In fact, they're completely saturated, right, by cell towers everywhere. This is the local high school near me. And this is a cell tower that went up, and then the school redesigned itself, but the tower stayed right where it was. And what do you know? It was just remodeled right up against that tower. In fact, if you see here, you can't see it too well, but here's a tree. There were a couple of trees that were here that had to be felled. They did not survive. Was it from the radiation from the tower? Well, that's a really good question. And there is research that indicates that towers with beams that are going right to trees in close proximity, that there's an effect on the trees. And some trees have had to be felled. They get damage to the crown and so forth. This was not research, so I can't say, but it certainly is interesting that the trees that were here have died. As on this side, there were actually more trees down a little bit, can't see in the picture, that also had to be felled. So if you want a good review study on cell tower radiation, I recommend this publication in Environmental Research by Alfonso Balmori. It was published in 2022 entitled Evidence for a Health Risk by RF on Humans Living Around Mobile Phone Base Stations from Radiofrequency Sickness to Cancer. Reviewed the existing scientific research on people living near cell towers and found radiofrequency sickness, that's that constellation of microwave illness, electromagnetic sensitivity. There have been a lot of names, electromagnetic radiation syndrome, where there's headaches, dizziness, sleep problems, as well as increased cancer and also changes in biochemical parameters. Now, you might think that the US government is onto this issue and ensuring protection for people. But in fact, there is no agency of the US government that is currently looking at the issue of the environmental levels from radiofrequency radiation from cell towers and ensuring safety. Often the FDA will be pointed to if you ask about this. And one mother determined kept writing and got a letter from the FDA when she asked, look, I was told that when I asked about the cell tower near my home, that the FDA ensured safety, that because the FDA had found it to be safe, it was safe. So can you show me the studies on that? The FDA responded that the FDA does not regulate cell towers or cell tower radiation. Therefore, the FDA has no studies or information on cell towers to provide in response to your questions. So, it's outrageous that there is no entity, no expert agency of the US government looking at this research and informing the public about it. Now, in other countries, cell towers are prohibited on school property. Russia, Israel, New Zealand, Chile, Greece, Bangladesh, Lithuania for kindergarten specifically. And some countries actually have special regulations, like in France, levels must be minimized for base station antenna sites within 100 meters of a school. In some countries, you couldn't put a cell tower on a school because they have such stringent recommendations that they wouldn't be allowed to, because the emissions would violate those more stringent recommendations they have near homes and schools. Now, there are some U.S. school boards that restrict cell towers on school property: Los Angeles, Palo Alto, Westland, Wilsonville, Temecula Valley Unified in California, Loudoun County near me. It is, right down the Beltway here in Washington, D.C., the wealthiest county in the world. They now say no more cell tower leases on schools. They're prohibited. Any new leases. Several school districts have reversed course. Montgomery County no longer allows cell towers or new cell tower leases on elementary schools, so they say. Portland, Oregon ended consideration of new leases. Prince George's County decided not to renew the master cell tower leasing agreement that it had done, allowing all the schools, all the high schools, middle schools, to be cell tower sites, marketed as cell tower sites by a company. That's a story for another time. I lived through it. That was my county. So in LA, Los Angeles, California Public School District, they say, now we don't know that they completely follow this, but nonetheless, they have utilized a precautionary threshold level that addresses the non-thermal exposures, and they have a limit set at 1,000 times lower than the FCC standard. So they say, to protect children who they say are a potentially vulnerable and sensitive population. There are actually 3 Board of Education resolutions where they prohibit cell towers on or near the schools. And there are actually many communities that have large setbacks for wireless antennas so that they are distanced, set at a distance from homes and schools. I have a list right here. Now, when a new tower is proposed, the first question you might ask is, well, do you have insurance for damages from the long-term exposure, if there are health effects from exposure? And the answer is no, because insurance companies rank the risk as high. When it comes to cell towers, the issue is considered comparable to asbestos by insurance experts. And the standard is to now exclude coverage for RF damages. And that goes back many years ago because of reports showing that there are these non-thermal impacts that have been documented in studies. And of course, insurance companies don't want to risk it. So they have excluded damage from electromagnetic fields as industry standard in general policies for years. And there's been no coverage for electromagnetic field damages since 1997. And what you're seeing here was a cover of a report from Business Insurance, the next asbestos. And you see here, there's a cell tower image. They talk about it. And of course, the companies themselves, they actually define non-ionizing radiation, including electromagnetic fields, microwaves, as pollution. And they don't even cover it. So when you buy a phone, you can actually get protection package. So if it drops or falls or whatever, Verizon has it, several of the companies have these packages. But if you read the fine print, they will not cover for pollution impacts, and that includes wireless radiation. So it's considered a type of pollution by the wireless companies themselves. This paper is very important. It is a review paper looking at the issue of liability. It is for companies. It's called Limiting Liability with Positioning to Minimize the Negative Health Effects of Cellular Phone Towers. They reviewed the, quote, large and growing body of evidence that human exposure to radio frequency from cellular phone base stations causes negative health effects, end quote. And they recommend restricting antennas near homes and within 500 meters of schools and hospitals to protect companies from future liability. And companies have known for a long time about this issue. In fact, the Ecolog Institute report from 2000, commissioned by T-Mobile, recommended an exposure limit 1,000 times lower than FCC's current power density limit. And in their recommendations, they say that that limit should be rigorously adhered to, especially in sensitive areas such as residential areas, schools, nurses, playgrounds, and hospitals, and all other places at which humans are present for longer than 4 hours. Companies warn shareholders, but not the people. Not the people living near their infrastructure or the people who buy their products. They actually say in their 10K reports that there could be changes in the laws, that they might incur significant expenses in defending themselves against lawsuits, and that they don't have insurance in regards to this matter. And here I have the Verizon Wireless, Crown Castle, AT&T, and T-Mobile, their statements in their 10K reports to shareholders about this issue. And yet what we hear is, this is 5G built right. It's really 5G built right in front of our homes. I was shocked when I just took a trip to Boston, and these are all over the place. There are towers, and they are just, I mean, they're on one end of the sidewalk, so they're just a few feet, can't be any more than 10 feet away from these windows, all across the entire city. There's another report I want to make sure you're aware of for your toolbox when you're addressing this issue in your community. And that's the European Parliament Study Research Report, Health Impact of 5G, that concluded for the commonly used frequencies that have long been used in wireless communications, as well as 5G, which uses all kinds of bands, ones we've used for forever, and then newer frequencies, that these fields are probably carcinogenic for humans, and in particular related to gliomas and acoustic neuromas, and clearly affect male fertility and possibly female fertility too. So take a look at that. My time is winding down. I'm going to take the whole time up because I want to get so much in, but I am not able to share some of the things I wanted to share with you. This is an image from Dr. Leonard Hardell and Tarmel Kopel looking at measuring levels, and these are important studies that you can share in your community that show that when you're closer to the antennas, like on the street or in their beams, when they're closer to the ground, that you can get higher intensities. There's also 7 case reports which were summarized by Leonard Hardell and Mona Nielsen that looked at health effects in 16 individuals after 5G base stations were installed near their homes. There are 7 case reports that look at them. And they found within hours of the 5G activation, participants experienced symptoms, sleep disturbances, fatigue, headaches, irritability, difficulty concentrating, memory issues, and that when the people left the situation, moved out of their homes or their apartment, left those workplaces, that then those symptoms decreased. And if you don't know about what's happening in New York and the 5G, please take some time to search 5G cell towers in New York City. The city government calls them kiosks because some of them have this little kiosk thing at the bottom, but they're gigantic. 2,000 of these jumbo 5G poles are planned. They're 32 feet high, many 10 feet from bedrooms and living spaces. And New Yorkers were furious. There are a total of 16, maybe more, community boards that have issued disapprovals or moratoriums or we don't want them about these poles because they are ugly, big, they emit radiation, and it's been outrageous that the government has been allowing these to go up across the city. There was just a rally against a tower from one that's being proposed in Forest Hills, right near a historic elementary school and a playground. And if you're interested in this, please go to the National Call for Safe Technology or Wired Broadband or New Yorkers for Wired Tech to learn more about that. This is just an image from their recent protest. Ooh, I've got 11 minutes. So birds I'm going to talk about wildlife so briefly, so important. Birds nest and perch on transmitting cell antennas, and they are so highly exposed. Please take the time to read this 3-part landmark research study by US experts. It's over 1,200 studies that have been looked at about the effects of non-ionizing radiation to animals. Blake Levitt, Henry Lai, and Albert Manville are the authors. Really, really important, policy changing work here. It's extensive. They have supplementals with all the documentation. And they found that even at very low intensities, there are impacts to animals. And all species studied, actually, there have been effects that have been documented. Broad range of effects, which ranges from impacts to orientation, migration, reproduction, mating, nest and den building, and survivorship. So quickly turning to pollinators, honeybees, there is a research base and evidence that it's found impacts to colony strength, homing ability, that's the ability to come home, the immune system, behavior, physiology, reproduction and fertility, orientation, and the queen bee egg laying rate as well. This is documented not only in the Levitt et al. Papers, but also in a review done by Phil et al., Biological Effects of Electromagnetic Fields on Insects. It's a systematic review and meta-analysis. Another really important paper, they looked at non-ionizing both lower frequencies as well as wireless frequencies. And here I have, though, how yet we are being marketed cell phone cases to protect the phone with the bee on it, not technology that protects the bees and the pollinators. So it's beyond. My mind was blown when I saw these products, wildlife wireless products. We have the Amazon Echo and animal decorations, and even a cell phone case, which is a bee. You're probably familiar with this research from scientific reports that looked at exposures to insects and found that as they did simulations of insects exposed to 5G's higher frequencies, and found that as the frequency got higher, the absorption rate increased. Not to a certain degree. There's a resonance. There's frequency range where there's a resonance effect, where the exposure becomes very intense to the insects. In fact, they found that exposures could increase the absorbed power could increase between 300 to 370%. And the researchers concluded this could lead to changes in insect behavior, physiology, and morphology over time. Well, then these scientists, several of them did follow-up studies. And I'm going to talk about 2 important publications. One was the author's name is Geladze, and it looked at the honeybee and actually looked at the absorption into the brain and body tissue, first of its kind study, and found, again, as the earlier studies showed, that there is the resonance effect, and for different tissues and areas of the brain, as well as the body, that there are these frequency ranges where the level becomes so high. And you can see, I should have explained this, and I'm sorry, let me just do this really quick. So here you have 2 gigahertz, 6 gigahertz, 12 gigahertz, 24 gigahertz, where you see much more lighter color in the bee. So you have the same power level. It's the same level of intensity, but the frequency changed, and you get a different absorption into the insects, which are flying closer to all these antennas as well. Similarly, they did this with the bee body, but sort of looked at different aspects. They looked at the brain and body tissue specifically, and found these changes with the higher frequencies. And then they did not just the bee. This is another study by some of the authors. They did Geladze as well as Arno Thielens, who has been simulating insect exposures as well. And they did the ladybug and also the praying mantis. And they found that the absorption can rise sharply depending on several variables. There's the frequency, but as well, there's peculiarities of the different insects where the insect size and structure are important, and that there can be, like as an example, they looked at the cuticles, that's the hard outside of an insect, and found that it increased with frequency so that the ladybug's cuticle rate rose from 0.1 watts per kilogram to 11.9 watts per kilogram. That's 119 times higher as the frequency went higher from 2.5 gigahertz all the way to 100 gigahertz. Now remember that the frequencies for 5G, this is just the beginning. Industry is testing for 6G and 7G, and they are looking at frequencies that go all the way to terahertz. So what we have now is just the beginning of where we're headed. And I know I have 5 minutes, and I'm going to use every last minute. So increase your distance to decrease your exposure. These images are from the International Commission for the Biological Effects of Electromagnetic Fields. They're a very important paper on exposure limits and engineering solutions. And you can see as the phone is distanced, there is less exposure. So it's the first thing to know is keep a distance. Distance the phones and laptops away from your head and body. Don't keep them in your pocket and bra. Here's some tips to reduce exposure, especially if you're just starting out. Avoid placing devices on your laps, especially those of children, and during pregnancy. And don't use wireless earphones. That's on all the time. It is always transmitting. And also, you're then getting the phone, which is transmitting, and that device in your ear. Kids keep them in their ears all day, right? They're walking to and from classes with those in their ears. It's really better to use a wired headset and have the phone away from the body. Better yet, use airplane mode and master airplane mode, or don't have the phone on at all. Have some more time when that phone is off. So you do need to know airplane mode and how to turn your phone off. I cannot tell you how many people I know, I talk to them about this issue, they don't even know how to turn their phone off. So we need to learn how to do that, how to turn the antennas off. You turn airplane mode on, but now the technology's changed. You need to learn how to go into settings, make sure Bluetooth is off and Wi-Fi is off. There's a lot you can do. You can take pictures, videos. You can use applications that don't need the internet all the time. If you have to navigate and you don't have an old style GPS, which is what I have, you can get it all set up in your phone, then turn it on airplane mode with antennas off and navigate. You will still be able to get to where you're going, but you don't have to have the phone radiating at you all the time. So I told you about how France has this information already. In fact, many countries already have straightforward advice on cell phones. They say exposure to children should be minimized. And of course, prefer corded technology. Use Ethernet cords. Use corded phones, not cordless, and opt out of smart meters. One quick way, if you're new to this issue, is to create a sleep sanctuary. Just reduce your exposure at night and start out that way. Remove electronics from your bedroom. Turn your phone on airplane mode. Better yet, use a battery-powered alarm clock. Do not charge devices near your bed or head or body, or use them while they're charging, because then you're even getting more electromagnetic field radiation. Turn off routers and wireless devices and networks at night while you're sleeping. Clear all electrical cords out from under your bed. So I have a lot more to share, but I don't think I have the time to do it. Local governments, check. Do you have an ordinance about cell towers? Educate your policymakers on this issue. If they say their hands are tied, their hands are not tied. At the bare minimum, and there is a lot they can do more than this, they can write a letter to the federal government calling on them to have stronger regulations and to update their outdated 1996 limits. Advocate for safe technology at schools. The federal government has a lot to do. They have to update their limits. They need to have monitoring, enforcement, and oversight of the industry. And get this regulatory capture situation needs to be addressed. I just did a big filing to the FCC on this. Now, if you want to stay updated with us, please go to Environmental Health Sciences. There is a sign up there at ehsciences.org. Wireless Health Facts is the page. We are just getting our site up and going, but there is a way that you can sign up to be on our list. Please go sign up so that we can keep you informed of what we are up to, because we have a lot going on, and there's a really important page on what doctors and scientists say that I think you'll find as a really important resource. Thank you so much.
Perfect timing.
The time.
Well, I have a lot of questions. Can you do me one quick favor? Can you put the slide with the sleep sanctuary back up? I just wanted to see that. If you're able to share that real quickly.
Sure.
Like 2-3 slides back.
Sleep sanctuary.
Yeah, I'm like sending this stuff to my kids, and I want to make sure I'm getting it all. And you said even electrical wire is not under your bed?
You know, you want to clear all wires, all electricity. That's a first step. There's actually a deeper dive we can go.
Right.
But,
Yeah. Right, well,
yeah, electricity.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate all the information that you share with us. I really wish we had more time with you, because I'd love to ask you some questions. If we can unmute the audience so they can share their appreciation for everything Theodora shared with us today.
Sure, and I'll be in the panel tonight. So
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Great information.
Thank you.